The uncertain future of the Taken and Dread had one of the most convoluted writing processes for any of my videos, so now that it's out, I wanted to talk about what got written when. The writing process for the video began with the release of Heresy and its lore. The day after it came out, February 5th, 2025, I read through all of the lore that was available in-game and in the API. I tend to prefer reading lore on ishtarcollective.net when possible because it has a much more streamlined experience. They pull the non encrypted lore from the API, categorize it by release, and make it readable in accessible web pages. This means it's easy to look at all of the lore from one time, for instance, episode Heresy, without paging through tabs of weapons and armors hunting for the items that were actually released together. The main lore that was initially encrypted in the API for Heresy was the Sundred Doctrine items, the seasonal lore books, Songs of Descent, and Heresy and Truth, and the lore book for the chess puzzle, Tales of a Wanderer. One quirk of the episodic system was that the weapons from future acts were available in the API at the start of the episode, unencrypted, meaning the lore from the Act 2 weapons could be read early out of context. This will come up later. After reading the available lore on February 5th, I had an idea for a video. The lore talked extensively about the metaphor of the Taken as knives, which is a callback to the grimoire from the Taken King, but also connected to a lot of the lore from the final shape about the power of the deep and the first knife, the Witness. I started gathering quotes for a video talking about the Taken as a knife, but didn't get far into the process because I was preoccupied by the new episode, and Sunder Doctrine, which released on February 7th. After playing the contest dungeon, I had the idea to make a separate video unpacking its lore, but hadn't actually read any of it. After wrapping up contest mode attempts for the night, I took screenshots of the relevant lore tabs from the dungeon and put them into a new Google Doc for that video. With contest mode stuff, I didn't end up having time to read the Sunder Doctrine lore until February 10th, when I jotted down some notes about my interpretations and ideas. On February 13th, I replaced the screenshots with full transcripts. At this point, I decided to also include the Micah Traveler Visions and Metaiodoxia to connect the Sunder Doctrine lore to the situation in the Pale Heart, the Final Shape, and the Traveler. With this, I started actually writing the script, some of what would end up becoming the A Knife in the Garden section of the final video. This is when I set the somewhat foolish goal of finishing the video by the release of Act 2 on March 11th. To be fair to myself, I didn't really fully understand how big the video would end up being, and was still treating this script as a smaller project and not a long-form multi-hour essay. At this point, I didn't write a ton because I was waiting for the conclusion to the dungeon quest, which was time-gated and couldn't be completed until February 18th. February 18th is when the video really began to take shape. With the conclusion of the dungeon quest, we learned that the Dread sought Oryx's chisel in Rogue's vault, which directly connected them to the Taken storyline in Heresy. This led to the decision to combine the Taken as a knife and the Sunder Doctrine scripts into a single video, talking about the Taken and Dread storyline in Heresy with their connections and parallels. This is when writing of the video began in earnest. I wrote the beginning of what would become the Pantheon of the Deep section to tie everything together thematically. In the writing, all the ideas started to come together with a through line and themes, which helped me feel a lot more confident about the essay. By February 28th, I had finished what I thought to be the first draft. At this point, the video was 16,000 words and contained most of the Pantheon of the Deep section and pretty much all of the A Knife in the Garden, Birth of the Dread, Sunder Doctrine, and Conclusion sections, and an introduction that would eventually get scrapped and rewritten. The video at this point was not organized into sections and was just free-flowing text. I realized that this video was much longer than I expected it to be, but still had a little bit of hope for that early March release date if I could lock the script in quickly. I ended up getting very sick in late February, which lasted for a week and a half and pretty much killed those pre Act 2 hopes. I did take a couple of passes at the script, refining some stuff, but knew that the script might change with the release of Act 2. This is where the lore for the Act 2 weapons being available early comes into play. Refusal of the Call was included in the pre Act 2 script, and I speculated about the new hand on the knife. At this point, I was considering the Guardian and the Dread as potential hands, but without the context of Act 2's story, it was pretty small and I didn't go into much detail. The release of Act 2 on March 11th prompted a lot of changes to the script during the following week. The main ones included the modern section structure, which largely didn't exist in the Act 1 script, plus a lot of small additions. The biggest structural change was reordering the Sunder Doctrine armor quotes to have Visage of the Flame first, rather than third as it appears in game. This helped tell the story better and allowed me to create the A Knife in the Garden section, which focuses more on the interplay between the Traveler and Witness than the Dread themselves. The reveal of Rite of the Nine prompted me to consider them as a possible hand on the knife, and to look more deeply at Division and its connections to past 9 lore, particularly Dust. It also added a lot of quotes from the Echo of Navigation that helped with the video, particularly the one I used after the title sequence to set the tone of the video. Later that week, I thought that the script was mostly done, so I had my girlfriend proofread the Pantheon of the Deep section. However, I was very wrong, as Act 2, Week 2 had a lot more focus on the new hand on the knife than I expected. It gave us the Sloane quote about a Dread commander influencing the Taken, plus Resonance Song and From the Last. This prompted me to begin writing what would become the new hand on the knife section, and rework how I discussed Refusal of the Call with the context of how it appears in the story. Originally, the new hand on the knife section was placed in the Birth of the Dread section right after discussing Keith Eyre's birth. On March 18th, having completed those sections, I decided to delay the video until the end of Act 3 because I was afraid of continuing to add substantial sections to the video each week like I had during Act 2 Week 2 and Act 2 Week 1. I switched focus to finishing the Dark Future script, which had been partially written since January, but writing had been stalled on for 2 months. I wrote most of the Dark Future script in the 10 days between March 18th and 28th because I was sick again, this time with COVID, so I had to isolate myself to avoid getting others sick and didn't have much to do aside from writing and playing video games. In this period, Act 2, Week 3, and Act 3, Week 1 ended up changing almost nothing about the Taken and Dread script, as the majority of New Hand on the Knife stuff was contained to Weeks 1 and 2 of Act 2. Finally, when the finale of Heresy dropped on April 1st, I started wrapping up the Taken and Dread script. Act 3 primarily just added Waiting Song, the quote about Keat Eyre being controlled by Oryx and Rezile, and the quote about killing the Echo removing the possibility of ending the Taken threat forever. Only the conclusion and the new hand on the knife sections received major changes, but I did take passes at the whole script to clean things up. By April 11th, the script was essentially done. I was just waiting for my girlfriend to have time to proofread it with me. The last major change in this period came on April 14th, when I decided to completely scrap the original introduction and write the new one, which I think is much more effective at telegraphing what to expect in the video. On April 19th, my girlfriend and I went over the introduction, Pantheon of the Deep, and A Knife in the Garden sections. At this point, my goal was to get the video out before the Edge of Fate reveal because I was worried that reveal would lead to me rewriting portions of the video further and didn't want to have to delay it a second time. That night, I began recording and editing the first 3 sections of the video, beginning my sprint to the finish line. Finally, on April 25th, my girlfriend and I went over the Birth of the Dread, Sunder Doctrine, and Conclusion sections, which led to the decision to move the Keat Eyre and Lord of Every Nothing stuff to its own section after the Sunder Doctrine lore, which became the New Hand on the Knife section. At this point, the script was complete, and I simply needed to record and edit the video to release it. The final word count ended up being just under 22,000 words, a mere 6,000 longer than that original pre-Act 2 script. I had to really push myself to get the video out by May 1st to give people enough time to watch it prior to the Edge of Fate reveal on May 6th. It still is uncertain how the video will age upon that reveal, but I'm hoping that it doesn't invalidate or change that much. As always, thank you for being a channel member. Your support helps me continue to make videos like the uncertain future of the Taken and Dread. Let me know what kind of behind the scenes or bonus videos you would like to see in the future in the comments. Thank you for watching.